Hey, what's going on, everyone? We have some set 9 PBE comps for you all to try out. I believe there are around 10 comps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that is going to be Noxus, Yordle, Demacia, Deadeye, Void, Gunner, Shurima, Challengers, Rogue, and Kalista. So keep in mind, before we get into this, you may notice already that there are no tiers in this version, and that's because PBE is changing all the time, and also there's no rank stuff in PBE, so it's really just stuff to try and hopefully try to build upon, maybe find some improvements here and there before the live set comes out. So we're going to get into it. There's some item recommendations. There's like a carry focus recommendation. So we are going to start off with Noxus Reroll and hopefully try to cover as much as you need to know to kind of get the comps rolling. So first things first, we have Noxus. This is going to be a 3-cost reroll comp. You'd reroll primarily for Darius and Katarina, and since Echo is also a 3-cost, you can just throw them in as well. The 6 Noxians are going to be Scion, Darius, Katarina, Kled, Swain, and Cassiopeia. And then you just want to follow up with trade synergies for both Darius and Katarina. So the way you play this is you want to play 3-cost reroll, so you're going to want to slow roll at around level 7. And what's nice about this comp is that you could build both AP and AD items because both Darius and Katarina can kind of hold on to them. And especially since a lot of the legends or some of the regions give a lot of bonus items, it's kind of easy to like itemize all of them or both of them. And then you can still have leftovers for either Scion and Aatrox in the late game, or Echo if you get him to 3-star. One thing to note though is that you do want to kind of snowball the early game and like kind of win streak in the early game because that's pretty much how the comp works. It's kind of like Anma Squad of the previous set. You just need to have a good opener early to really get the comp to its full potential. But there are some item recommendations for both Katarina and Darius. Darius is kind of like the hybrid damage dealer, so he has like the Titan's Resolve, but there's for some healing, and then Katarina focuses more on AP damage. But there are a lot of different things to build. Pretty much everything here is good enough. But let me know some of your favorite combinations so far. We will add augments, expand the how to play section, add the core section, maybe even recommend some legends that you could use with some of these comps in the future in case you want to force them. But let's move on into the next one, which is Yordle Reroll. So Yordles are pretty much always going to be a reroll comp now. There's pretty much no going around it because the trait itself, Yordle, it just revolves around 3-starring as many things as you can. But the 5 Yordles we're going to focus on is going to be Poppy, Kled, Tristana, Teemo, and Heimerdinger. So you do want to focus on, however, are the 1-cost. So you want to reroll at level 5 and pretty much play the same way we've been playing 1-cost reroll from before. If you do manage to get some 2-cost units 3-star, you want to prioritize Teemo. He's just a bit more useful right now, but that could change easily in the future. So to do that, again, slow roll at level 5 above 50 gold for your 3-stars. And then also try to save some gold to find Heimerdinger because he unlocks a lot of the bonuses for the comp. Itemization is pretty simple, AD on Tristana, tank on Poppy, and then AP on Teemo, but Teemo does kind of like some sort of mana regeneration. Next build up we have is the Demacia comp. So Demacia is more of like a vertical comp, and it revolves more around the 4-cost. So as you can see here, Shen, Jarvan, and Lux going to be your main people right now. Shen might just be like a universal good tank, like the typical 4-cost utility tank that kind of gets splashed around in a couple of comps. That might be the role that Shen can play in the next set. In this build, you want to focus more on Lux though as your damage dealer instead of Jarvan, at least for this version. So to do that, give her some mana regen and then some ability power to kind of really cap out the comp. Pretty much the core of the comp is going to be 5 or 7 Demacia plus legendaries if you can get them. So the default legendaries of this set are probably going to be Heimerdinger, Aatrox, and Ryze, and maybe even Ahri in this comp. But I'm pretty sure like Aatrox and Ryze can kind of be splashed in any comp. So in the mid game, you could play like the 7 Demacia, and then if you get like a +1 Demacia augment or something like that, or an emblem, then maybe you could fit 7 or 9. But if you get some of the really strong legendary units, go ahead and remove and drop down to the lower tier of Demacia to fit them in because legendaries are legendaries. Next up we have is Deadeye. Deadeye is another 4-cost related comp, and I think 4-costs are pretty good right now because there are a lot of heavy econ comps, so fast 8ing is really popular. Sometimes even like fast 9ing in some cases. If you head on over to the Discord, scroll down to the official updates section, and then we have like a feed of every official TFT related announcement, so you know exactly what changes are happening on the PBE server. But for Deadeye, again, 4-cost related comp, you're running 4 4-cost units, Shen, Sejuani, Urgot, and Aphelios. So the way Deadeye works is that they focus the highest percent HP target every couple of seconds. So a build I think is pretty good is having a Giant Slayer on some of your Deadeyes. So for Aphelios, Last Whisper is just essential on any AD carry, and then after that I would prioritize a Giant Slayer, and then the third item, any generic item will do. For your main tank Sejuani, just standard itemization is fine, Warmogs, Bramble, Dragonclaw. I mean, it's pretty much the same itemization we've been using for most tanks in the recent past. So one thing to note is that you don't necessarily want to force this comp, but you can kind of flex into this. And again, similar to other comps, you can play vertical synergy such as 4 Deadeye, but eventually you want to replace some of the Deadeyes with 5 cost units if they're available. But we have the core of the comp down here. It's Aphelios, Sejuani, Shen, and Urgot. It's just all the 4 cost units, and then you can kind of just fill in whatever you want. Maybe you want to add in a specific synergy to counter one of your opponents. Maybe you just randomly got one other thing upgraded that's like a decently powerful unit. Things like that. Oh, one other thing. I know that a lot of people are having trouble getting into PBE if you get this unable to connect thing, or if you're getting this insane waiting to queue line. Apparently, one solution is just logging out and logging back in and just trying to RNG the queue line until it shortens, but I'm not sure if it works 100%, it's just what someone in my server was telling me. But let's move on into the Void comp. Oh yeah, shout out to Void Sin, he makes a lot of these comps for us, and he also is available for coaching, so if you want to get a lot of help from some of the top players to improve your gameplay, go ahead and hit him up. The information is on bunnymuffins.lol/PBE or /meta. But in the Void comp, unfortunately no assassins. That's kind of like the callback to his name, but Voids are back in right now. So that's going to be Rek'Sai, Sejuani, Kassadin, Bel'Veth, Kai'Sa, and Vel'Koz. And this is another one of those vertical traits, but you do get like some kind of summon. So you could get like the Rift Herald, you could get Baron Nashor, things like that, and it's pretty cool. It's kind of like Cultist from a previous set, if anyone played that one. I believe that was set 4. But pretty much the trait just summons a big dude and they do some tanking. This specific comp is built a lot around 4 costs. As you can see, Sejuani, Yasuo, and Kai'Sa are all 4 cost units. And again, Sejuani is going to be the main tank. If you haven't noticed yet, Sejuani, Shen, those are like the 4 cost main tanks of the set. Those kind of always exist. It's just because they have a lot of utility and are generally like easy to splash into whatever comp you're playing. But I'm sure as time goes on, maybe other tanks get discovered for specific builds, and then we could kind of experiment with that. But for Kai'Sa, she is a challenger, but Gwynsu's is still pretty nice on her to get her to stack up for the late game, and then Giant Slayer or any other damage item, and then sometimes you could do healing, sometimes you could just go triple damage item on her instead and build her kind of like AP-ish. We have some item recommendations down here, so it could be like a Gwynsu's, Giant Slayer, Gunblade, Deathcap, Jeweled Gauntlet, Static Shiv, Staff, Guard Breaker, even a Morellonomicon isn't that bad. And then tank items on the main tank units. And then for Bel'Veth, you could kind of just put on like your leftover items such as the Thieves' Gloves, or the melee items such as like Titan's Resolve, Bloodthirster, things like that, because she will be taking like a little bit of damage. But one pattern I've noticed in this set is that a lot of the traits require like good starts for that specific trait. I know that sounds so silly to say out because of course like you want a good start for the specific comp you're going, but it seems more important in this set than previous sets, at least so far. But as written out here, the entire premise of this comp is to get to Kai'Sa with a decent amount of HP, then scale into 6 or 8 Void late game with upgraded high cost units such as Bel'Veth, Sion, Kai'Sa, and Sejuani. That's pretty much all you do. So you want to just maximize the trait as much as you can, and if you get the plus Void augments or emblems or whatever, like go ahead and use them and definitely lean into that. But you don't really care about the star levels of the other units. You just want a big Void, a 2-star Kai'Sa, and then some 2-star legendaries. Of course, if you can get everyone 2-starred, like that's obviously preferred, but that's pretty much the goal of this comp. Let's move on into the Gunner comp. So Gunners, they're just going to be another AD comp, this time revolving around Zeri. And one thing you could do is, you know the legend that gives you a bunch of augments that give you Zeke's Herald? Well, you could kind of play that in this comp because Jace is also a gunner, and it kind of works out because he buffs the units next to him. So Zeke's Herald works pretty decently on Jace if you want to kind of force this comp. Check out the Set 9 preview video if you want more information on that. But Zeri is going to be the main carry, Senna is going to be your late game kind of boost, and then generic tanks, Sejuani, Shen, and then the legendary Sion. And then you have a bunch of gunners in the back, Senna, Jace, Zeri, and Jinx for 4 gunner. But you could drop down to 2, you could even go up to 6 if you get a +1 gunner. Go ahead and experiment with that if you are able to get the augments, or one of the wacky portals that give like a lot of more units. You can definitely try one of those builds. One thing to keep in mind, I don't think I mentioned this yet, but in this set in particular, I think like just playing flex and just kind of playing the game is going to be more important than other sets. And sometimes guides, even though they're great to get a base off of, you need to kind of customize it to your specific game and really tailor it more so than in previous sets. So do keep that in mind whenever we have the set starting. But I will be posting a lot of guides on how to do that in the next set when it comes out, because I'm going to try to improve as much as I can, as fast as I can. And I'll hopefully be sharing that journey with you all as well. So if that is of any interest to you, go ahead and hit the subscribe button below. We are almost at 100k subscribers, so that'd be really cool to hit sometime in this set. Who knows, maybe you all surprise me and it happens in like a week or something like that. But this comp is related to the other AD comp that we talked about before, the Aphelios comp. So you could kind of either play this comp or the Aphelios comp, depending on which champion you hit, which is pretty useful because you could just run generic frontline, Sejuani Shen, and then whatever 2-star damage dealer you hit, just play that one, and then just find the complementary units to kind of boost up your team. But typically late game, it's going to be 4 gunner plus tanks, whatever you're hitting, and most likely legendaries in the super late game. But again, the Zeke's Herald is pretty good because Jace kind of buffs up units next to him, and then of course you want Last Whisper in every AD comp that you play, and that's going to be it for that comp. Next up we have is Shurima. Shurima is probably one of the cooler regions in League of Legends, I think. Maybe I'm a bit biased because a guy that I play a lot of League of Legends with, he mains Azir, so I just think of Shurima a lot for some reason. But Azir is going to be one of those attack speed based AP damage dealers, which is a little awkward, but I think he can work here. Rageblade and then 2 more damage items, doesn't really matter which. Probably going to be good, but I think Rageblade might be his best item. But again, we'll be making updates to the meta snapshot every single Friday. Some potential early game item holders would be stuff like Cassiopeia, Kayle, Teemo, and Talia because they all can use some of Azir's items pretty decently. And this comp is just a vertical comp, so you just want to go into as deep into Shurima as you can, and then you just use Shen as your main tank. I think Shen and Sejuani are going to be some of the most contested units of this set. Similar to how contested like Echo and Sejuani were in set 8. But some other comps that can complement the Azir build is going to be the Kai'Sa Void build because both Azir and Kai'Sa use the Rageblade and use generic AP items. So you could kind of flex between the comps. So you know how I said with the AD comps you could just buy tanks and then flex between Aphelios or Zeri depending on who you hit first. You could kind of do the same thing with Shurima and Void because you could say like, hey, I'm just going to play some tanks. And then maybe you could swap into whoever you hit first, Azir or the Kai'Sa. Just some things to keep in mind. Not saying it's like 100% necessary. Definitely don't like force this after hearing this. But it's just some things you can consider when you're playing the game. The good news about this comp is that it's pretty easy to play because you just need to stack as many Shurima units as possible. And of course, here are some of Azir's other items that you can use. It's in no particular order, really depends on what you have in the game. For example, if you have a healing augment, it's called like Celestial something, I forget what it's called. I think they renamed it a bit. Then you definitely do not need the Hextech Gunblade or Handed Justice, and then you focus just on triple damage item. But maybe you're facing a lot of units that deal some backline damage, and then you need Azir to heal up a bit, then go ahead and build the healing items if you don't have the augment, and then leftover items probably go on Nasus because he's the other 4-cost unit, Shurima unit. Next up we have is Challengers. So Challengers are making a big return. You could think of them like Duelists from the past, but I don't know if they'll actually play out the same. Right now we have the Locket on the Shen, but again, I don't know if that's going to be one of the mainstay ways to like play this comp. But Challengers and Duelists work kind of the same way in that they are the attack speed build. But here you just want to focus around Kai'Sa and Yasuo, and then you just add a bunch more Challengers instead of going into Void synergy, for example. And then play around the Kai'Sa and hope she stacks up to kind of kill everyone. One thing to keep in mind with this comp is that you do want to focus on one unit at a time because Challengers have like a mini reset built into the trait. So whenever you're positioning in the late game, that's something to consider if you're in 1v1 scenarios. But yeah, Lockets are pretty good. We'll see if stacking Lockets is a good strategy similar to last set, or if you just stick at one and then just focus on other good items as well. But Yasuo and Kai'Sa are going to be the 2 damage dealers in your comp, and because you like don't have like the 3-item tank, you want to get 3-item Yasuo and 3-item Kai'Sa most likely. Next build up we have is the Rogue Reroll. So rogues are kind of like the fake assassin trait of the set. It's like a delayed assassin. I shouldn't say fake, but they jump to the back line once they reach, I believe it's below 50% health. So you're really going to want to focus on Zed and Katarina. This comp looks a little intimidating because you might not know which units to actually roll for, and in the past, in a lot of assassin comps, they always had a 2 and 3 cost carry. And which one you go for really just depends on the patch. So there are going to be some patches where Zed's really strong. In that case, focus on Zed and do a 2 cost reroll. But then, on the other hand, there are some patches where Katarina's really strong. So then you want to do a 3 cost reroll and maybe skip over the Zed. This is where a lot of the in-game knowledge or like patch knowledge kind of comes into play, because you need to know which one to go for or which ones are good on different maps. Then, since these rogues rely a lot on their spell damage, you want to be building critical strike on them. So Infinity Edge and Jeweled Gauntlet allow their abilities to critically strike. So whenever you're reliant on your ability for damage, you want to build those. And if you're reliant on auto attacks, for example, then you want to build stuff like Deathblade instead. So you may notice on some champions you like Deathblade, some champions you like Infinity Edge, and you might be wondering like, hey, why do you like this one over that one? That's generally kind of the rule of thumb. But this comp is pretty decent because you could stabilize at 3-2 at level 6 and roll down to 10. A lot of comps played like that in the past, and I think rogues are going to follow that similar econ structure. If you don't need to do that though, let's say you just hit everything, you could just level up and slow roll at 50 gold at level 6 or 7 to 3-star your units. Again, it depends on whether Zed or Katarina are going to be the better versions of the comp depending on the patch. So you kind of have two options there. Bunch of other item recommendations down here. I like healing a bit on Zed and Katarina. I don't know, yeah, Hand of Justice is there, so Hand of Justice works really good with IE and JG, but sometimes Bloodthirster's a bit better on Zed over the Hand of Justice, because the Bloodthirster kind of builds out of a sword, and you might have those items more often. After that, you could build Lockets, because again, this comp is kind of like one of the faster comps, because it's an assassin comp, and Lockets are just really good in short fights. After that, we have the Kalista Reroll comp. I believe this is the last comp that we're going to go over today. I believe this is the 10th or 11th comp. I forgot how many we counted in the beginning, but this is going to be the Shadow Isles Kalista Reroll comp. Pretty much you want to run 4 Shadow Isles and 4 Challenger. That's going to be like the main core of the comp. And then you want to reroll for Kalista 3. So the one tricky part about this comp, and I think there might be other versions that get developed later, because we only have one 3-cost unit in this build. So if we reroll only for Kalista at level 7 for 3-cost units, it might be hard to get her to 3-star, because you're not rolling for other 3-star units as well. So maybe you want to only play this comp if you have a lot of champion duplicators, or if you just magically happen to get a ton of Kalistas. Nevertheless, let's read into it here. So if you have attack speed items or an early Kalista 2, you can look to play this comp. Keep in mind, having an early Kalista 2 is extremely rare, but again, the units in this comp will probably be improved upon a lot as the set kind of goes on, and I'll definitely update you on those versions as they come up. But you can roll at level 7 to get to 3-star Kalista, but maybe sometimes you can't get her, you have to go to level 8 and roll for her there in order to get your 2-star Yasuo and Gwen, because one of them's a Shadow Isles, one of them's a Challenger. But Kalista's pretty cool because she can execute the enemies, so stacking Rage Blades to get a bunch of spears on them is probably the best way to go. After that, Gunblade's pretty good because she'll heal for a big pop whenever she does pop people, so it's kind of a cool effect. But overall, so far, let me know if you are able to get into PBE. Let me know how you're finding PBE so far. But here are the 10 comps that I think you should be trying out right now. And of course, there are going to be many more that are going to be added. And this will be updated once the set comes out every single Friday on bunnymuffins.lol/meta. But this one here for specifically PBE is going to be on bunnymuffins.lol/PBE. But let me know down in the comments if you have any questions. And let me know which comp you are looking forward to try out the most. But since it's the end of the video, it is time now for the Bunny Muffins tip of the day. And the tip for this video is going to be, don't take PBE too seriously. Just try to use it to learn what units go with which, maybe what comps flex into different comps, and learn how to play around the new set mechanics. For example, the augment rerolls are pretty important to learn how to use. Maybe you want to experiment with different legends so you know what your favorite one is when the set finally comes out. And overall, just don't take PBE too seriously. I know a lot of people, they super sweat on PBE and they kind of burn themselves out, and a lot of times since PBE isn't really ranked, you don't really know what actually works and what doesn't. Hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.